Welcome back to another episode of Gatehouse Insights. Today, I'm joined by Deborah Kliger, who is an associate lawyer. In this episode, we'll chat about what attracted her to practising in wills and estates and estates litigation, the benefits of practising at a suburban law firm, how she became the VWL 2020 president, and their agenda when it comes to engaging with women with disabilities and chronic illnesses. And make sure you subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel to catch it all. So I wanted to begin with what attracted you to practising and specialising wills and estates and estate litigation.
So my interest in wills and estates really began when I was a law student. I started working about halfway through my legal degree or volunteering at Women's Legal Service in the area of family law, and I realised then that I had an interest in sort of the more human areas of the law that profoundly affect clients' lives and not just their hip pocket. In my final years of law school, I started working at a small suburban practice where wills and estates is really their bread and butter work. I studied succession law in my final year of uni and was really fascinated by some of the policy and moral underpinnings of the area of law, in particular the idea of testamentary freedom, which is that a will maker can choose whoever they want to dispose their estate or give their estate to, and the tension between that and what we call in our area testator's family maintenance claims. Mm-hmm. And those are claims against an estate for further provision, which are usually made by family members. In my final semesters of law, I actually did a few clerkships at mid-tier sized firms with strong wills and estates practices. And I really realised then that this was the area that I was going to practice in. When I graduated, I started working at a medium-sized firm, predominantly in the areas of wills and estates, family law and property law. And I think that was really excellent grounding for me because this area of law is really varied and cuts across so many different areas. I spent most of that time working in estate planning, which is really preparing wills and powers of attorney. And I found there was something quite special about sitting opposite a client and hearing their life story, how they've accumulated their wealth, their family relationships, and putting into place an estate plan that could give effect to their wishes. After a few years of that, I wanted a new challenge. I really wanted to be working on the types of matters that I read about in law school. So I made a few career moves to find that litigation work in the estate area, and I'm pleased to have found that now in my current firm. So that's how I got here.
Awesome. It's quite, I think it's good that you did family and property initially as well as wills and estates because it gave you that, I suppose, grounding, and it also allowed you to know which area you wanted to really focus in. So
absolutely, yeah.
That was really good. Yeah, awesome. So as a wills and estates lawyer, you're dealing with an area that is quite personal. How do you manage other people's emotions so that, one, it doesn't draw energy away from you, and secondly, you ensure the client feels more at ease with, with the whole process?
I suppose in terms of managing my own emotional bucket, as I like to call it, I think it's really important to take a step back and to remind myself that getting embroiled in the client's emotions is really counterproductive and it impedes my ability to work as a lawyer effectively. I have my own outlets, so I box, I meditate, I have the occasional glass of wine just to release some of that energy, emotional energy that you can absorb from clients. In terms of managing clients' emotions and building their confidence in the system that we work within and the legal process, I think it's really important to acknowledge clients' emotions and to validate them as part of building trust and rapport with your clients. At the same time, though, I make sure very early on in a client relationship to set the expectations and make it clear what my role is in the process, which is to deliver a commercial outcome for them. Quite often, clients need a reality check in terms of what they see as being a just and fair outcome may not actually align with the likely outcome if we went to court and proceeded to a final trial. I think it's important to reinforce to your clients their obligations as litigants in terms of trying to resolve the matter quickly out of court, to make sure that they are not reactive and see the bigger picture. Often there can be a lot of back and forth infighting when it comes to this area of law, text messages, etc. It's much like family law. And I like to sort of try and sell early resolution to my clients as being, well, if there's any scope of preserving these family relationships, then resolving this quickly is the only hope of doing that. And if the family relationships are completely broken down and can't be repaired, then this is an opportunity for you to really move on from this hurtful experience and start a new chapter.
Yeah. You've always, I suppose, practiced law in the suburbs. What have you seen to be the benefits for you practicing in the suburbs?
I'm a big advocate for practicing in the suburbs. I always have been. I think aside from the obvious benefits, which for me are a 10-minute commute to work and an underground car park, there's a really fantastic culture in suburban practices. You'll often find that staff are more loyal to those practices. There may be lawyers who have been there for 10, 15, 20 years, and that also promotes loyalty from clients because they have a continuing relationship with the same lawyer and the same firm. I think there is also a lot of positive work-life balance that can come from working in the suburbs, whether it be that you have hobbies outside of the law that you want to pursue or family commitments that you need to meet. Working close to home can really help that. I found that working in suburban practice is actually really great for having a connection with the community and supporting local businesses. And you can really have a thriving practice in the suburbs. So I certainly recommend it for anyone who's looking for a change or even for law students who are coming out to know that that's an option for them.
It's there's this, we speak to a lot of law students and they always think that they need to be in the city, top-tier firm, corporate environment, and we always encourage them to, also, look at those options, but also look at firms in the suburbs because they get great experience and access to really good, I suppose, mentors as well. So
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I think it's a complete misconception that all the good work is right here in the city. Certainly for younger lawyers, the opportunities working in the suburbs are fantastic. Suburban practices can range from a group of 5 lawyers to up to 50. Like in my current practice, we have 50 employees. And those types of firms generally invest more in their young lawyers. Mm-hmm. They trust their young lawyers more. There can be less of a hierarchical system, if you like. And those lawyers are given opportunities to do complex work and work a bit more autonomously than they may get in a larger size firm in the city. Certainly from my own experience, I have, as a suburban lawyer, had the opportunity to work on high net worth estate matters. I have high net worth clients. I have dealt with an estate for a former member of the judiciary. Within 6 months of starting my current role, I actually was preparing for my first ever trial. And at the end of that, the barrister had a coffee with me and said, I don't know if you realise, but most lawyers at your level won't see a trial. Even senior lawyers or partners may not see a trial from start to finish because of the high levels of early resolution. So I think there's wonderful experience to be had there, and law students should definitely keep their eyes open for opportunities in the suburbs.
Yeah, awesome. Now, you're also the 2020 Victorian Women Lawyers President. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So that adds to your workload quite significantly. I was wondering whether you could share a little bit about how you actually got to the position you are at with VWL.
So I joined VWL some 7 years ago when I was still in law school. There was an event that was there was a post on for an event on the LSS website, and I said, this looks really interesting. I knew nothing about the organisation, but I went along. It was a panel-style discussion for VWL's Justice Committee, and I was so impressed with the high calibre of speakers, the content of the discussions, how professionally the co-chair of the Justice Committee had presented herself. And so at the end of the panel discussion, I mustered up the courage to go and speak with her. And I said, how do I get involved? And she was so welcoming and said, we'd love to have you on board. I joined the Justice Committee and stayed there for about a year. I felt very privileged to be on a committee with many practising lawyers, many of whom were from large commercial firms. And I think initially I thought, do I fit in here? I'm a law student, I'm working in a small suburban practice, but as time went on, I really felt supported by these women. I was looking for more networking opportunities as I was finishing my degree, and made a shift to our networking committee, where eventually, after putting in some hard work, I was tapped on the shoulder and asked, well, I think you should nominate for co-chair of the committee. And I said, oh, really, me? But I did, and I found leading a committee to be really satisfying. After that, it became just a really natural progression of somebody saying, all right, now go for this other position, try and sit on the voting executive, I think you'd be great. And after a few years, here I find myself as president. So it's a very proud moment for me.
It's an amazing achievement.
Thank you.
Because now you're leading a whole, I suppose, group of women
Absolutely.
in Victoria, which is incredible. And I'm sure you've learnt lots on leadership along the way.
I really have.
Anything particular you've learnt on leadership?
I think there's a fine balance with leadership of having the respect or earning the respect of the people you lead, but also being empathetic enough and having that ability to still connect with them and support them. So I think I've learnt that leadership is something that you, over time, it's a skill that you develop over time, but I've learnt that leadership is something that I can strive for, it's something that I can do, and it's not just in the context of VWL, but I suppose leadership is also something that I'm now striving for in private practice as well. I suppose one thing I'll add about leadership is that even when you are a leader, there is such benefit in having mentors. In taking on this role as president, a former convener of VWL reached out to myself and the vice president. She's now a highly accomplished partner of a consulting firm, and said, would you like some coaching in terms of your role? And through that relationship, I think it's really changed the way I look at leadership and how I've devised our strategic goals for the year. So even if you are a leader, there's always someone that has a lot more knowledge than you, and you should take advantage of that.
Yeah. Speaking on strategic goals, could you share, I suppose, VWL's strategic goals for 2020?
So we have a number of goals, but I suppose the two principal goals that I'd like to talk about are diversity and healthy workplaces. The first goal really is to engage with and celebrate diverse women in the law, and that includes women from diverse cultural backgrounds, those that identify as LGBTIQA+, those that identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, and women with disabilities or long-term illnesses. The second goal that we have really relates to promoting healthy workplaces and shifting the focus of wellbeing from the individual to legal workplaces in order to promote mental health and also staff retention.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's pretty big goals for this year. So
they are indeed.
I suppose So you have driven VW as a gender when it comes to engaging with women with disabilities and chronic illness. And this stems from, I suppose, your own experience with a chronic pain condition. Can you please tell us a little bit more about your condition and how it's played into your personal and professional life? I suppose, if you could share a little bit on that, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So I'd always been quite an active person. I was never picked first for school sports or anything like that, but I led an active life and had no real restraints on my mobility all throughout university and my childhood. When I finished my degree and started my graduate role, even just a few days into the job, I started noticing some symptoms, difficulty walking and standing, and I put it down to a wide variety of possible causes. Maybe it was my heels that I was wearing. Maybe I wasn't drinking enough, and over time, my mobility started to reduce further and further. And it did take a bit of my confidence at an early stage in my career. I was learning how to be a lawyer and also trying to work out what was going on with me from a physical perspective. After some time and seeing a few doctors and having a number of scans, I found that I had a few benign growths sitting in my left foot, which were impinging on my nerves. And that was affecting my ability to walk and stand. So what happened was I made the decision to have them removed surgically in the hopes of it being a quick fix and returning to my ordinary level of mobility. Months and months passed after surgery, and unfortunately I started noticing that I wasn't getting better. In fact, in many ways I was getting worse and seeing new symptoms that I hadn't seen before. After probably a year and a half of talking to doctors and saying, look, something's wrong, I don't think this is right, and a number of suggestions being made to me as to more invasive types of treatments, I found a pain specialist that diagnosed me with complex regional pain syndrome. And as the name suggests, it's complex and it's poorly understood. It's basically a long-term neurological condition where your nervous system is hypersensitised. And so small activity, or such as walking a few hundred metres or standing for 15 minutes, actually triggers a pain response. If you have a look online, there's some fairly bleak literature about the condition, but there are certainly ways of improving the symptoms and finding a way to overcome the challenges and lead a more satisfying life, I would say.
Does it impact on your, I suppose, daily life personally and professionally?
Absolutely. So particularly in my first couple of years of practice, it affected me to the extent that I wasn't really able to stand long enough to collect my printing. Walking from office to office became difficult. There was no way that I could hide that from my first employer. It was understood that there was something going on with Deb, and people tended to respect that but not to ask too many questions. So also in terms of networking and sort of social functions, I found it hard. I was really involved in VWL's networking committee at that stage, and I would go to networking events and try and engage in conversation with guests, and I'd be shaking and nobody knew. So it was particularly challenging, and it's been a long journey for me to get here where now my condition is well managed, and on a day-to-day basis it really doesn't affect my work. But yeah, it's been a long time coming, a 5-year journey.
Yeah, it is quite long.
Yeah.
Looking back, and if you had your time again, as a grad, I suppose, lawyer or studying your first year, would you be more open and honest about your condition and communicate it with everyone within the team?
Absolutely. I think certainly in terms of my initial job and my first years of practice, I didn't express it verbally, but physically everybody could see it. And I think there was a disconnect between what people were observing and what was going on with me internally. I do wish that I would have been more open with some colleagues so that they understood that if I declined, for example, an invitation to go out for lunch, it wasn't because I was necessarily snubbing them, but it was because I was concerned about how they may see me if we had to walk from place to place. I do wish that I would have been a little bit more open, even in my first role where it was, I suppose, semi-widely known that I had a health condition. I recall us having a firm retreat where there was a team building exercise, and I had to muster up the courage to talk to one of the partners who had organised the exercise and express my concern that perhaps I might not be able to participate. And he said to me, "Oh no, I assure you it's not physical at all." But I knew that the retreat was held at a beach house and that we would have to get from the beach house to the beach and walk along the sand, and it was the unknown. And when we got there, I was with the Wills and Estates team, and as it turns out, the challenge was running from one post to another and collecting letters. And the partner that I was working for, who was really sensitive to what was going on with me, said, "You know what, Deb, I could do with the extra exercise. How about you be the brains of this challenge and I'll just do an extra lap?" And I can't tell you how grateful I was that he just spared me that embarrassment at the time.
Because if he didn't say it, what would you have done?
Probably would have walked it.
No.
Okay. But yeah, so I think I would be more open. And I suppose what I found was in those first 3 years, when everybody knew, I didn't feel that I needed to express it, but I probably should have. And I was actually quite hesitant in making a move from that firm to another firm because I was concerned that maybe they wouldn't understand or it wouldn't be accepted. I thought at least they know here and they respect me as a professional. In performance reviews, I would always be told, "You're one of our hardest workers." Pain never came into it. I wasn't really taking days off for pain. You just develop a really strong level of resilience. I made the move a few years in to a new firm, and what I didn't realise is in doing that, I had the opportunity to sort of recreate my image. And that's when I started not talking about it because I realised, wow, I really could pretend for the most part and they may not know. And only in certain situations, if I was vulnerable, then I could say something. I suppose I regret that because in staying silent, I think it perpetuates an internal belief that there's something to be ashamed of and that your colleagues won't accept you. In my current role, I feel a bit more confidence in talking about it. I think I'm at a stage in my career where I'm comfortable enough in who I am as a professional and as a person to be open and I can back myself. And I think my firm will back me.
So what's, I suppose, inspired you to share your story now?
I think as time went on and as I made a few career moves, I felt a lot more comfortable talking to old colleagues about the issues I faced at work or in terms of my health. And what really struck me was that a number of them had said, "Look, I've never told you this, but I actually have a disability or I have this chronic illness and I've never spoken about it because I'm really concerned that the firm won't accept me. They'll think that I'm not as hard a worker." And I felt a strong sense that, well, this isn't right and something really should change. I've been really inspired by some leaders in the law that have spoken out about personal issues which affect their lives. One of them would be Catherine Brooks, and you recently, or probably last year, did a Gatehouse Insights video with her. She's a really accomplished employment lawyer, and she came out about living and working with MS. I went on to read her blog and just so much of it resonated with me. I also was really impressed by the current president of the Law Institute of Victoria, Sam Pandya, who many people will know is an advocate for cultural diversity. He recently appeared on the Law Institute of Victoria journal in traditional Indian dress. And I think we're at this stage in the law where people are looking to leaders to drive agendas like this, to drive diversity. And so with me, I think I have a voice as VWL's president, and I want to use it in a way that is authentic and that can bridge a gap that I see in the law in terms of engaging with and celebrating diverse women.
Yeah, I think it's amazing that you're sharing it, because I think a lot of people, as you said, probably feel like they're too afraid to speak about it because they might feel rejected or not good enough. So, but, you know, we're all sort of dealing with something. So the more we talk about it, the better it is, and we can help each other get through things. So
that's right. I couldn't agree more.
For sharing it. So
thank you.
I suppose, how have you overcome the challenges of managing a high-pressure career and VWL while living with this pain condition? How did you build resilience to achieve, you know, your success?
I think it was after a couple of years of just trying to get through each day, putting work and health first and everything else second and third and fourth, that I realised I wanted to gain control over my life again. I wanted to be in the driving seat when it came to managing my pain, finding personal satisfaction and driving my path to success in the law. I read a lot. Anyone who has a chronic pain condition will know that or any mobility issues will know that you have a lot of time to read. And I found inspiration, particularly in women who have beaten the odds, if you like, when it comes to recovering from an injury, or who have shown great resilience in overcoming a very serious loss or life event. First and foremost, I said, if I want to overcome this physical issue, I need to understand it. And so I read about the physiology of pain, and there are some amazing resources out there that are actually like handbooks for anyone living with chronic pain. I was also really inspired by a woman named Janine Shepherd. I encourage anyone who's watching to watch her TED Talk and read her book, Defiant. She was on the path to being an Olympian, an Australian Olympian, when she was hit on the road while riding her bike. Wow. And she spent, years, I think it was, in a spinal ward with spinal damage. And it was said that she would never walk again, never bear children, and never lead a fulfilling life. She went on to do all of those things, including taking up a new passion to become a flying instructor, which it was thought she could never do. That really resonated with me, and a message that came from that was, in her words, that you are not your body, and that was really meaningful to me. I also read stories about women who had overcome loss and great challenges, and one of those was Sheryl Sandberg's book, Option B. Most people know her for the great book on women and work, Lean In. But in that book, she talks about her own unexpected loss of her husband and the father of her children while they were on holidays. And she really draws on a lot of psychological studies about how to overcome adversity and how to find joy again. And there's a fantastic study that she refers to there by a psychologist by the name of Martin Seligman, I believe. And he says that in order to overcome adversity, you need to resist the 3 Ps. Yeah. And that stands for personalisation, pervasiveness and permanence. And personalisation is really blaming yourself for the adversity that's come into your life. So in my case, it would be, I should have gone to a doctor sooner. I shouldn't have had surgery. I should have had a second opinion. Maybe it wouldn't be the case. Pervasiveness is that whatever challenge you're facing will seep its way into every aspect of your life. So for me, it would be, I have this condition, I can never have a successful personal life. I can't maintain my friendships. Professionally, I won't be taken as seriously. And I've really pushed against all of that, even subconsciously before reading the book. And permanence, I think, is a really important one, which is I will always be like this. It will never get better. And so for me, that's become a little bit of a mantra, pushing against those 3 Ps to find satisfaction. I think in doing that and in finding meditation and exploring talk therapy, I've really managed to get to a point where I don't feel that I'm held back by my health at all. I'm achieving the things that I want in my career. I've managed to have a personal life that I find fulfilling. In terms of permanence, one thing that I always thought was, I'm never going to be able to travel again. And I love travel. And in the last few years, I've really taken it upon myself slowly to go on solo trips. First it was one in Broome, one close and safe, and then it was Bali, and most recently I just came back from Mexico. I would never in my wildest dreams imagine doing that. But for anyone taking solo travel for whatever reason, it's really cleansing, and I found it really satisfying.
I saw your recent photos to Mexico and they look amazing. So
Thank you.
It's now on the bucket list. I suppose, is there any closing thought you wanted to leave with us and those that are watching?
I'd like to speak or just make a comment on wellness. I think that wellness has become a real buzzword in the legal profession. It's almost associated now with scented candles and expensive activewear. And for me, I think that we really need to reconceptualise the idea of wellness and well-being, and law firms should do that too, to recognise that having a culture that is built on perfection and conformity can actually breed really poor mental health in anyone that deviates from the norm, whether that be that they have a disability or a chronic illness, mental illness, or are dealing with any difficult personal circumstances. I can see that there's a real shift in the law now in terms of focusing on well-being. They're now teaching it in law school. Recently there was a book, a textbook released for students on this issue. I know that some of the practical legal training providers are now delivering mental health training for lawyers and for partners in law firms and HR. I'd really like to see firms embracing that, and I'd really like to see firms embracing diversity, because we are now in a time where we have new law, we have flexible work. I think we really need to rethink flexible work, not just in terms of it being an option for women or parents with child-minding responsibilities, but also for anyone that may need some time away from the office to do their work, whether it be at home, and for us to move against that culture of presenteeism. I think we're almost there, but we still have a fair way to go.
And there you have it. Another episode of Gatehouse Insights draws to an end. Thank you for watching, and thank you for sharing this video with your friends. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel where you can see more.